coming up. I mean, it's skyrocketed. So a $600 pension 10, 15 years ago won't buy much of anything here today. The reason why the millennial generation is starting to give up because they can't afford to get a good job or own a house.
A million Venezuelans voting for this assembly, saying it's actually less than 3
minutes, and people are going to start rioting in the streets.
Was reported to have asked Putin for military support that would help him stay in power.
We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
And 8 more years goes by till Bernie himself finally admits to his sons, hey, I've been running a Ponzi scheme.
Does its dominance mean it can use the alliance for its own ends?
Since 1981, bond yields, also known as coupon rates, have just gone down and down and down.
The Reserve note will be your biggest financial liability.
There we go. All right, so we are live. I'm excited to have my guest, Mr. Daniel Amenduri from Future Money Trends. And so apart from starting a couple minutes late, we're here and we're going to chit chat a little bit. So Daniel, thank you for joining me on RTD Live Talk. And so besides all the little internet malfunction we might have, I muted you. You might.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. And so, as always, we got a little live conversation. We're going to go back and forth a little bit. And then, as always, there's a number above my head, 1-833-LIVE-RTD. People can call in and ask questions as we move along. But before we dive into it, I usually give it a couple seconds for people to tune in. And so, once again, welcome to Rethinking the Dollar, or RTD Live Talk, rather. And Daniel, for those that do not know you, I'm familiar with your work. I followed you for the last couple of years over at Future Money Trends.
You know,
so I know. So go ahead, share with us a little bit as to who you are for those that may not know you and how you got into the educational / investment side of things yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of your show. The audio content is it's like sec here. If we have a minute, I'd like to at least try to switch computers, and perhaps maybe it's coming from my end and not your end, since you said you're in a hard line. For me to disconnect and then try to reconnect on another computer.
Okay, not a problem. So with that being the case, we're going to, everybody stay tuned. We're about to switch computers and come right back. So Daniel, do you? I'm about to stop the broadcast and then we'll get it going. So go ahead and hang up, and then you can go and get set up and we'll chat with Dita back. So I'm still live. So basically, because we are starting about 15 minutes late because of the quality of the internet on either one of our part, we're going to try to start this over again. So for those that are tuning in, bear with us. We're going to basically, he can probably just jump back in any minute now when he's ready. But other than that, so I'm looking forward to having Daniel on the show. I've been following his work for a long time. So he's definitely a guy that is well informed and well in tune as to what's going on in our monetary system, as well as he's very knowledgeable as far as a lot of investment opportunities that I think will be great for you guys to get a chance to learn about from him directly. So let me pull up my screen so I can see who all is watching us and tuning in. Got to get the chat up. Chat is disabled for this live stream. Okay, so my chat is disabled for whatever reason. Let me try to figure this situation out here. So yeah, I'm not, let me, it's interesting how many hiccups enable live chat automatically. Yeah, enable slow mode. Select one, select language. Let me see here. Yeah, so it looks like on my end, my chat should be up and running. So I'm not quite sure as to why it says my chat is not working. But I'm not discouraged. I'm going to keep on plugging away. And so sorry if anyone's chiming in via chat. I would like to at least acknowledge who is joining us thus far. Chat now. Yeah, it's the first time I've okay, so my chat is up. So we got a couple people. Scott Robinson, hello. Pad, hello. Alonzo Johnson, Scott Robinson. So guys, welcome, man. Appreciate you guys tuning in. And as always, as soon as Daniel is able to join us again, we will get to the interview side of things. But in the meantime, as always, on RTD Live Talk, what's happening in your world? So we got a couple people chiming in and say U.S. stocks is worth 30 trillion. Total cash in U.S. is 4 trillion with only 1.7 trillion in circulation. What's wrong with that? S. I've been mentioning that for quite a while now, that there's 10 times more outstanding obligations or claims, rather, to the amount of paper, physical paper that is available, as you put 1.7 trillion there, and then the 30 trillion of stocks and all that other stuff. So it's a big discrepancy, which come the day of a bank run or some sort of that nature, people will find out that no matter how much your bank statement might be, you know, when you look at your little mail bank statement, says how many ever, whatever zeros you got behind it. If you can't go get it out the bank when you need it, it's probably as good as saying that it's not really there. So we got Boone from North Carolina. Home Rocks, I believe that's Home Rocks, I believe, from Boone, North Carolina. Never heard of that city before, if that is the case. We got Zip Fix Guitars. Hello, all. Alaska Prepper, thumbs up. Alaska, I'm going to get with you. We can probably do something after the holiday as far as me joining you on your show. We'd love to do that and help a brother out. So definitely we can make that happen. Nikolai Smith, yo, what's up, man? How you doing? 200 trillion in liabilities in the U.S. alone. Yeah, a lot of unfunded liabilities that can never be repaid. And then that leads to one of the questions I want to discuss with Daniel is that if you hadn't had a chance yet, the video I did earlier in regards to what's happening and pretty much what I'm about to really start, you know, really not necessarily preaching, but really shouting from the rooftops is the idea that not only is there so much questionable information being given about the baby boomers not being able to, you know, collect pensions and just the whole just the whole fraudulent activity, put like that, around pensions and stuff in general. The millennials, you know, I'm in that category age-wise somewhat, and I'm like, with watching, and as much as I cover what's happening with the baby boomers, I have zero expectation of being able to receive anything in the conventional sense through the financial markets in the way that most people tend to look for things. So in that video earlier, I mentioned how it's probably time, if not already, for everyone to become a little bit more proactive in their own monetary / financial dealings, as opposed to trusting some of these financial institutions, which are all designed for their own benefit. But that's just me. So if you haven't, make sure you check that video out. I think it was very detailed. At your convenience, Mike. I truly appreciate that. Yep. Farmer's Source, 21% unemployment in the U.S. 21 unemployment. Yeah. And now I'm assuming Home Rocks, or I'm sorry, Pad, that 21% is the true number, probably factoring in those that are no longer in the workforce looking for work. So I would imagine that's the case as well. We got the U.S. is running off junk bonds and government loans. So for real, very good point there. And that's another thing. If you look at how this whole inverted bond yield curve, all of that stuff, you know, which is real, it's not really technical, but you got to actually know the nuts and bolts of how that work. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of for how much longer will institutions, governments, or citizens in general feel like it's okay to continue to loan, you know, to purchase a bond, period, from the government, knowing that they're already up to their wazoo in debt. And the only way they're going to be able to pay that loan off that you might lend them is through issuing more debt to pay that back. So it's like a ever repeating cycle of nonsense that has to come to an end one day. So I've always been suspect with that. Student loan default surge. Fed sees debtors tax refunds. Yeah, I'm assuming that's an article title. But yet I posted something on Twitter, I think it was last night, about something that Mike Maloney shared in his five indicators or something like that for a recession. And one of them was that creditors are not paying back borrowers in a similar fashion as to what happened prior to 2008 Great Recession. And just the graph itself just shows this complete drop off of people basically defaulting on loans. So you factor in that as well as everything else he mentioned, it is not looking pretty at all. And I'm more than convinced. I've actually been convinced for quite a while now, even having interviewed Gregory Manarino and a lot of guys from a year or two ago, just hearing their methods as to how they measure whether or not we're in a recession. And I was convinced a long time ago that the market, something is not right. And of course, like always, we'll never hear on the mainstream source that the market is, when's the last time a politician or a financial expert actually got up there and told the truth about anything? It's not happening. It is not happening at all. So like always, everyone always gets up on the podium or something like that and say, oh, the market is strong. Our economy is great. And I'm thinking like, what the hell indicators are you looking at? Because the stuff that I'm seeing in the alternative media world tells me that something's wrong. Tells me something is wrong. So I wonder, I'm going to try to connect with Daniel. There you go. Oh, he's back. Hey there. I can hear you very well.
Well, your audio is crystal clear now.
Okay, so welcome back. And so, yeah, I was just trying to hold over the audience a little bit till you return. So
I'm very sorry about that. Yeah, it was just like it was real. There was some sort of issue where it was like every 6 seconds you said something, you'd be gone for 5 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Well, not a problem. So we're here now. So as I was leading to prior to, welcome to RTD Live Talk. As I mentioned, I've been following your work for a long time and excited to have you on. And so for those that may not know who Daniel Amenduri is, can you share some information as to how you got into this world? I know you're an investor, entrepreneur, you got a lot of things going on. Share with us a little bit who you are and how you arrived at this point in your life.
Yeah, I was always interested in entrepreneurship and business building, but I'll tell you exactly right here, I was, especially with the show like Rethinking the Dollar, I started out, chewing on my wife's ear about what was going to happen with the currency and what was going to happen with the 2008 crisis, to go back to 06, 07. And she finally got tired of hearing me talk about the economy. So she said, why don't you start a YouTube channel? This was when YouTube wasn't even part of Google.
Yeah. And
I started a YouTube channel called Vision Victory. And as that hobby grew in audience, I ended up starting a letter called Future Money Trends. And same thing, my wife was like, hey, I really want to quit my job. We just had a kid. She's like, you need to, monetize this and turn this into some sort of where you can have advertisers or do paid subscribers. She goes, turn this into something. And so I ended up going the advertiser route, but started Future Money Trends and several other publishing companies today. And it's a really good situation. I love the internet. I was just telling somebody today, I'm a subscriber actually. I was like, I love Steve Jobs and Bill Gates because they've made all of our lives so much better. And it's true. I get to do my hobby. I get to read all day. I get to invest, and I get to share everything I learn with everybody at Future Money Trends.
That's good. That's good. So that's good. So I want to dive right into some of the hot topics. And so you're familiar with the channel and whatnot. And so I think we've probably interviewed a lot of guests. So we are probably on the same school of thought as far as where we're at and where we're heading. But it's always good to get a different voice sharing that information. So off the top, what is your thoughts of the health of the economy? Where are we at right now? Are we in that economic expansion, as a lot of politicians and financial gurus might get up on the mainstream news and tell us? Where are we at right now?
It's an interesting question, because I think where we're at, certainly the scenario with our debt and the dollar and the potential and systemic risk of rising interest rates is there. But we almost went through this depression, this underperformance of the economy for a good 15, 20 years. And I think, with renewed optimism because of the election and the tax cuts and the rollbacks of regulations, I almost feel like maybe we bought ourselves, to call it a year to 3 years. And, you know, it's not necessarily that the train has shifted course, but perhaps the drowning man got one last gasp of air, and he's got another 3 minutes in him as he was about to die prior to that. So I think the economy, it's good to see. You know, I was doing a report today on wages, you know, biggest increase in 21 years. I saw the freight trucking industry, some of the freight loads that, you know, they're up 140% year over year. That's a really good sign for the economy, but it's also very inflationary because you've got truck drivers, you got a truck driver shortage, and you've got higher gas prices. So you've got these goods, and to transport all these goods is going to cost more. And you're seeing it in the price of companies like General Mills. Everybody's familiar with General Mills. We've all got their products in our house. This is a stock that I don't think it's had a down year in the last probably 40 or 50 years. In the 2008 crisis, I think it actually was up that year. The stock probably hasn't had an annual down year of 7%. The stock is down in 2018, 28%, and it's all because of the inflation. It's going to eat in on their margins. You know, they can't eat. How fast can you hike a box of cereal or food that's consumer staple? So it's interesting. I think we're heading into that inflation that everybody's been waiting for. I think it's finally going to happen, but it's happening with a little bit of growth. So, you know, I would say we're in a 2006 to 2007 moment where things are going to feel really good and things are going to look really good, and optimism is going to continue to soar. But I think at some point in time, we're going to have to come to grips with reality. And I don't know if there's going to be an economic reset or a massive change to the US dollar like there has before several times in our history. I don't know how it's going to all unfold, but I do know that the US is going to have $1 trillion deficit this year. And with interest rates, if they climb up to 4%, you're talking about $500–600 billion of annual interest payments. And this becomes unsustainable. And even Goldman Sachs recently over the weekend or late last week released a report talking about that this is unsustainable, that by 2028, assuming there's no recessions, we're going to have a $2 trillion annual deficit. That's not sustainable.
Yeah, I do agree 100%. And so the idea that there's so many things happening right now, either, you know, globally or just within our own country. And the mainstream media continue to spew the narrative of we're in a healthy economy, everything's fine, everything's fine. And I actually did a video this morning in regards to the millennial generation and how they're really feeling the pinch now. And so I've noticed that a lot of news stories and whatnot is geared towards getting the millennials to put in more money. And so every article I commented on earlier was like, they're not saving enough. They're not this, they're not this. And I'm thinking, like, are they in a dire need of additional capital to where they're really trying to tell millennials to put, you know, we need more. So, you know, you got to get caught up on your retirement portfolio investment savings. So what are your thoughts about this whole pension system, this corroding? And so my thought was that I'm very confident that the baby boomers are about to experience a rude awakening as far as this whole pension crisis is happening. What about the millennials? Should they expect to be able to receive something down the line themselves, given what's happening right now with the pensions for the baby boomers?
Mike, it was all one big experiment. No generation had really retired. People worked. People did what they loved. People passed it on to their children and their grandchildren. Farmers passed on their trade. It was a very normal thing in life for people to pass on their trade to their families, and they would continue to do things and have those skills. And then we came up with this idea of retirement. Of course, it worked initially, like any experiment. You know, if I started taking heroin this time tomorrow, I would say, hey, you know, I didn't really experience any problems. I felt great, actually. I had a great night. And a week goes by and I still feel great. But eventually that experiment will come to the ultimate dead end. And I think that's where retirement is. You take a person like in Social Security, the first people to receive those benefits, they put in pennies. I think the first lady, forgot her name, she put in about $28, and then she ends up receiving like $80,000 over her lifetime. So, of course, it worked in the beginning, especially for the initial recipients. But the retirement is not something worth pursuing in my opinion. I think everybody should pursue what they're passionate about, monetize what they do, monetize their hobbies, seek out multiple streams of income. You know, one of the things that always bothered me about the retirement plan, even as a 15-year-old boy, was they would say about the 401k you want to max out your 401k because you'll be in the lowest tax bracket when you're 65. And even at 15, I was like, I was kind of anticipating being in the highest tax bracket when I was 65. You know, I wanted to be rich.
Right.
And but as far as the millennials and anyone, you know, 50 years old, 60-year-old, I think a much better goal is to, first of all, monetize what you enjoy doing. And then also when you make your investments, invest for income. And that's, you know, a lot of people, they get tied up in this idea that they're just, you know, grow and capital appreciation. But I tell people to start small. You know, there's one website we recommend called Peer Street, or even if you did a REIT, like a real estate investment trust or something, start small. Get one of these investments to pay your cable bill or to pay your cell phone bill. Make it real. Don't just put it off and, oh, this is something that'll happen when I'm 70 years old. Make it real today, and then buy more income and keep buying more income until all the income you've purchased pays for all of your bills. And that is the definition of financial independence, when your passive income pays for all your bills.
All right, I do agree 100%. Now let's we talk about investing and whatnot now. So let's get into the idea of what the conventional knowledge and conventional monetary financial literacy has taught us to, you know, you save, you spend, you give some. And so that's the whole narrative. You have to save enough or minimize your lifestyle so that you can save some for your future. But then most things we're saving in conventionally is stocks or bonds or whatever type of products that the financial system has spun off to us as investments. So share with us, you know, your thoughts on the practical type of investments that people are used to, and then give us some unpractical that are probably a little bit more alternative based, but yet also offer some good returns down the line, just for people to become more aware of alternative thinking with their investment strategies.
That's a great question. And I think it's the most important one people can ask themselves today when they're saving money, because obviously you're not getting anything at the bank. And I think the idea, especially when it goes back to retirement savings, that everything goes to Wall Street. Wow, what a shocker, right? Everything goes to where a commission is in the financial industry, and a fee. And there's, you know, sometimes there's up to 17 fees. There was a report on 60 Minutes about 401ks. You know, there's so many fees that you're not even seeing. Right. So that's where the conventional financial industry wants you to save. And you know, guys like Dave Ramsey, great people, and who they're trying to help people who are, you know, in debt to their eyeballs. He's doing his best by trying to get them on some baby step programs here. And I think that's actually what he calls it. But you know, look, when it comes to where do you save money, I think you have to have a healthy diversification. I always start with some precious metals because that's true money. I think you should have some financial insurance. And though the metals don't compound, they do hold their value. And that is the number one rule, whether you're investing or saving, is don't lose the money. So you have the gold and silver, you're not losing the money. Now, that doesn't protect you from volatility, from silver going to 20 down to 15, but it does protect the actual money. It's not going away. It's not going to disappear. And then once you feel comfortable with the amount of gold and silver you have, I would suggest people continue to save 5 to 10%, but then diversify it. And I wouldn't say this now so much, but 5 years ago, I was telling everybody to save money in single family houses. You know, you could buy these things for 100 to 200 grand in the Midwest and southern states. And, you know, they paid 15 to 20%. And it's a hard asset. You know, I love the idea of having some sort of hard asset backed business or real estate with diversification. You know, and if you really feel comfortable with your diversification, you can also save the same way the banks do. If it's good enough for the banks, why isn't it good enough for the average guy? And thank God we have this fintech revolution where now you can crowdfund private real estate investments. Yield Street, they have all sorts of investments that, you know, a few years ago, they were only available to the Goldman Sachs types, you know, where you're buying into a pool that's purchasing an oil tanker or a commercial property. There's so many ways because of fintech that you can get your money out of Wall Street and into some hard assets or some safe businesses. And I don't want to completely shy away from stocks. There are good businesses. And, you know, I can't, you know, for people who are focused on a dollar collapse or something that's going to happen to the currency, I would say this, that if you're worried about a dollar collapse, I know you're probably not going to run out and buy stocks, which is fine. But, you know, you have to consider companies like Coca-Cola, who's doing business in every country in the world except for North Korea, or a company like Disney, who essentially has no competitor when it comes to their theme parks or their cruise ships, the experience. Obviously, they have plenty of competitors in the entertainment, but seriously, who's doing it better than Disney with the Avengers and these other movies? So I think people also need to consider that, okay, whether the dollar's the reserve currency or a hyperinflated mess, does Disney still have value? Does Disney and Coca-Cola still have value? Will they still be doing business? So I think you have to look in the mindset of asking yourself, can I stand the short-term volatility? Because there's going to be volatility. And then the second thing is, will my grandkids be doing business with this company? Because if the answer is yes, why not buy it? You either got to hold a dollar or you got to hold Coca-Cola or Exxon or Disney. Or, you know, I wouldn't recommend too many mining stocks, but you could own a mining stock. But when it comes to the inflation trade, I would suggest just owning the physical metals.
All right, fair enough. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't, you know, also add in that, because a lot of the younger generation, especially, and I've mentioned it before, with the invention of this blockchain revolution that's taking place, a lot of people are curious and interested in the speculative nature of the blockchain with Bitcoin and like all the other coins. So would you see that being an alternative form of speculation / investment? Where would you categorize that? Because you have those that say that it's from the establishment, and then you have those that say it's an innovative technology designed to give us liberty and freedom with our money source, rather. So where do you stand with cryptocurrency, and what's your long-term thoughts on that technology?
I'm a big believer in the blockchain. Future Money Trends covered Bitcoin at $13. We covered one of the first publicly traded mining companies, Hive Blockchain Technologies, which is headed up by Frank Holmes, who's, gosh, one of the most respected people in the gold business. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm a big believer in the blockchain and adoption. It's very risky. Look, I didn't get involved in any of these ICOs, and I took a lot of heat for it. And it turns out like 90% of these things either went to zero, they were scams, people walked away. I like the big ones, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dash, Ethereum. I think everybody should have a little exposure to those. I do think that is going to be the payment future. I don't know which one, because you never know. Bitcoin could be the AOL of the internet. Right. Look at Yahoo was at one point in time the leader in search engines. So, and now Google, of course, has taken over the internet. So I don't know which one is going to be the currency. I do know Bitcoin for me is the safest because it's the only one that's truly decentralized. So I do like Bitcoin. I do want to hold Bitcoin, but I think it should be a small percentage of what your investable assets. I wouldn't suggest anybody go all in. This does face a lot of risk in the sense that you've got the largest banks, all of Wall Street, and much of the world governments that are going to fight this. So Bitcoin, what I tell people in our newsletter is Bitcoin does not have to beat the dollar. It doesn't have to compete with gold. It just has to survive the fiat currency collapse that I believe will unfold over the next decade to 2 decades at the most. But realistically, we could be seeing the fiat currencies collapse unfolding right now. It's hard to say, in 10 years from now, you and I, Mike, will be able to look back and say, oh yeah, that's exactly how it played out. But look, this is what we're talking about, a currency crisis, a fiat currency reset is something no one can predict the time. And it's very difficult to even see how it's going to play out because look, if somebody tells you exactly how it's going to play out, I'd have to question that. What's to stop the Federal Reserve or the U.S. Treasury from coming out with a gold-backed currency on the eve of a dollar collapse? I don't know. And people say, well, there's not enough gold. Look, when you got 4,000 nuclear weapons, nobody's going to ask to see the gold. They're just going to have to take your word for it. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but I certainly want to own some Bitcoin. I think it's going to be part of the future. And I also like some of the publicly traded companies like Hive, mainly because of its tie to Frank Holmes.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. So I had Frank Holmes on last week, and we have a lot in common. His son played basketball, and so they have, of course, they have the Hive operations in Iceland. So I lived in Iceland for a while. So great conversation with him, and I'm looking into Hive myself. But when it comes to the whole currency aspect, the rethinking the dollar. And so how I arrived at this scene is basically from in my younger years, having traveled a little bit and start to experiment and learn about currencies. And I'm well beyond convinced that the Federal Reserve note, it has its day. And so when it comes to just purchasing power in general, what amazes me is you have the purchasing power graph that comes from the Federal Reserve, and it's been cruising along the 0 point line forever. And so we say it has 3 or 4 cents to its original dollar from years and years ago. So it's a matter of just time before it actually goes, as I say, sub-zero. And sub-zero being in the lines of what's happening in Venezuela right now and what's unfolding in Argentina. And so can you just talk a little bit about if that day comes? Because the Federal Reserve note will be the last currency standing because everyone will rush into dollars at the last minute. But what would that look like in your, just imagine, just what can it look like for us here, being that we will be probably the last fiat currency standing before, and then what do you see, the domestically, what do we run to predominantly, you think?
It's a great question because I've given this a lot of thought, and I know you and I spoke a few years ago when we talked about this. And look, I used to think it was as easy as there being a currency collapse, and then it would unfold, and there'd be some sort of reserve currency, either an SDR. But look, just in the last 7-8 years, now we've got the rise of cryptocurrency. Now you've got blockchain that's attached to gold. And you've got the Sprott people and Gold Corp coming out with something where there's going to be, tradable gold on the blockchain with much higher integrity than what's going on right now with the COMEX. You've got China, who's acquired not only gold, but they're out there gobbling up gold mines. So definitely gold is going to have a role in the future monetary system, whether it's a center role or just I'll tell you, when these fiat currencies go, especially the dollar, just like the 2008 crisis or the Great Depression, people aren't going to forget that overnight. So gold for the rest of our lives will have a very, very key role in monetary history. And it already does, of course, but I'm saying in our near term, it's about to become a lot more important than it is today. Remember, it's owned by less than 0.5% of these funds. So when the funds start to come into gold, as my friend Doug Casey has described it, it's like the Hoover Dam going through a garden hose. Now, as far as the U.S. dollar, I tell you, the dollar, we had a dollar that you could exchange for gold. We had a dollar that only other central bankers and sovereigns could exchange for gold. We have the fiat currency dollar today. 100 years ago or 150 years ago, we had a greenback, which was an issued note that came, or not even a note, just an issued currency from the U.S. Treasury Department. There's been a lot of dollars. So what does the next dollar look like? I don't know. It could be a blockchain-backed Federal Reserve note. That's certainly possible. It could be a gold-backed or commodity-backed currency. I don't see an alternative fiat currency to the dollar. So that's why I tend to think that the dollar, I like what you said, that a lot of people in a crisis, the dollar might actually rally in the short term. And Mike Maloney's talked about how there could be severe deflation and then a hyperinflation. There's so many different roads this could take. And like I said, on the eve of a major currency crisis, a systemic crisis, the U.S. could come out and pull some wild card and reset the whole thing. Or who knows, President Trump, maybe he'll literally default on the debt and reset this thing. I don't know, because here's the thing. What people don't understand, because we all kind of live in our own bubble in the United States, is that the rest of the world monetarily is not doing that much better. and many of them are doing way worse. The US dollar is used in, I would say, about 30 countries, give or take 5 or 10, as their currency. I went to Panama a few months ago. I didn't have to exchange to any currency. I just used our money, our currency, and that's what they use. That's going on in a lot of other countries too. So, you know, I know your question was, how does it unfold? The honest to God truth is, I don't know. I would just say the second part of your question, where should you go? I think it's prudent more than ever to own some physical gold. I think you should own some gold in your possession. I think you should own some gold in a neighboring country like Canada. And I think you should own some gold offshore, like get it out there, put it in Switzerland or Singapore, Hong Kong. And then some cryptocurrency, and then some other hard assets. But outside of that, I would say people should not meditate on this all day long. I think you've got to live your life. And ultimately, your best preparation for a dollar collapse is in the mirror. Your abilities, your skills, because no matter what the fiat currency or cryptocurrency is going to be that will rule the day in the future, you're still going to have to be able to make it. So you're going to have some skills. You're going to have to be able to deliver value to other people.
Right. Very good. Very true there. Thanks for sharing that. And so as always, you know, we're streaming live. So people, we have close to 70-ish, give or take, fluctuate, people watching us. So as always, if anyone has a question that they would like to ask or chime in and share their thoughts. And so I have a couple questions here. So I'm going to just chime into the chat that I'm looking at now and see what's over here. And I'll ask a question until someone calls in. And so let me throw them through here. I saw some that I should have kept note of. And so some people here, a lot of people here are chiming in and saying that the cryptos were created by the deep state. And so they always reference some type of white paper or paper, that came out, I think in the 83 or something like that, describing this type of technology well in advance before it was actually issued after the Great Recession. So what are your thoughts on the idea that this was a designed technology to be implemented to lure us in to going even further into the digital age, because most dollars, as you're aware, is already digital anyway. And so what are your thoughts on that? Is this a part of the original design, or was this created to be some form of freedom tool for us to use? What's your thoughts?
Well, I was there in 2011, 2012 at different conferences when they only had 50 to 100 people showing up. And I'll tell you, it was all geeks and libertarians and anarchists that were pushing cryptocurrency. So, you know, if it's the deep state, I mean, look, that's over my head as far as if it was part of the deep state or some global government scheme. If I don't think it is, but I'm not going to rule it out, because obviously they've done a lot of other things that have, you know, we have no idea about. So I'm not going to completely rule it out. I would say this. If it is, well, how does that change anything? We already learned, some of us with our own pocketbooks, I'm sure money can relate, betting against the Fed in the short term can not be profitable. You know, I bought a lot of gold and silver in 2008 in anticipation of a systemic crisis. And I got the systemic crisis, only the Fed was able to inflate and paper over the problem. And, you know, I would have been short stocks in 2008 and 2009. And the Fed, when they announced QE, I essentially was betting against the Fed, and I lost that bet. So you know, if it is deep state, then you're probably guaranteed to profit in the cryptocurrency space. But if it's not, I think it's a real way humans can transact with each other without the interference of a third party, without the interference of banks. But look, I don't know if they needed cryptocurrency to get us used to not using physical currency. I would tell you, I turn 37 in a few weeks. If you catch me with cash in my pocket, you really, I mean, that's a rare time. I just don't carry any money, cash. I mean, I carry a smartphone, and I would say that, and that's not just for me. I mean, my wife, who she's not into any of this stuff that we're talking about, and you know, I went to Starbucks with her today, and she whips out her smartphone. She's got like some QR code on it.
Yeah.
Nobody's using physical cash anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's one thing that really I hinted on, I think, in a couple of videos a while back, that physical cash is our last line of monetary freedom. that we will have before this restructuring reset, just because it's the last little bit of anonymity that we can have outside of prying eyes. And so when we are into that next phase of this monetary system, it will be more controlled by a central source, unfortunately. And then people will look back and miss and appreciate the opportunity to be able to have a single dollar bill in their pocket that they could do whatever they want with without it being monitored or controlled. So it's unfortunate, but that's the day we live in. So, you know, just do the best you can with it. So now let's move a little bit towards your thoughts on politics. I'm curious as to, and so a lot of the libertarian, a lot of the Tea Party movement was really hopeful in President Trump and what he promised in making America great again. And so what are your thoughts on it, if you were to give him a grade after a year and a half, give or take however long he's been in the office, is he living up to his promises? And what more will it take for him to actually fulfill that promises of making this country great again?
You know, I was a big Ron Paul guy, and I loved, and he kind of was part of the awakening, him and Peter Schiff. And, you know, I didn't vote in 2008 or 2012, and I didn't even vote in the 2016 election, although I did donate money to President Trump. And I did this, you know, when he announced he was running for president, I said I was going to support him for one reason. And I said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I said, look, this guy is anti-establishment. And whether he fixes America or fast tracks it, I said, something's got to change. I knew if we had Hillary or an establishment Republican, it literally is just the same. And I'll tell you, it's really good that it happened, because a lot of things are coming out about the deep state that if he didn't win, we would have never known. We would have just kind of thought that, hey, things are corrupt and things are bad, but we would have never known the extent of just how bad it was. Man, it is ugly. Our FBI is corrupt. All the leadership, I mean, it's horrible. We knew the CIA was corrupt, but I mean, the FBI is it's very sad to see what's happening, to be honest with you, and scary.
Right. So I'm sorry, Daniel. So with that, that's a fact now, because it brings into question everything that's been told up to this point with the CIA, all those governmental bodies. How if this unfolds very badly, which is showing to do so, how do you regain the trust of the American public when you can't count on the people who were elected and overseeing our national security to how can we trust that, you know, in your opinion? On top of, you know, if you want to answer that last question too.
I don't think we do. You know, I'll tell you, when I was in a cab in Panama or Mexico, everybody in those countries will tell you right off, complete propaganda. It's just an arm of the government. It's propaganda. And I was telling my wife just a few weeks ago, I said, wow, you know, I think Americans are actually just catching up to what the rest of the world already knew about their own governments and their media. Yeah. And now Americans are finally saying, yeah, the media is propaganda. It's just a part of the government. And that's the case. And apparently it's always been the case. I think a lot of us, including myself, are just waking up and catching up to that fact, because, you know, just for some reason, if the corruption is in your own country, you're a little more blind to it. It's easy to point out corruption in Mexico or another country. But, you know, apparently when the people are born in your area, it's not possible, or it's not as evil. Or it's like Rick Rule talks about, you know, people are worried about wealth confiscation in Africa. Meanwhile, they're confiscating 45% of your income here, and nobody's complaining about it.
Yeah, we're completely used to it.
So, but back to President Trump. I'm some solid grades on his domestic promises. He literally is just checking off those boxes. I'm kind of impressed. It's very business oriented. He's doing exactly what he said. I'm highly disappointed in the Middle East. So I would say, you know, I'm happy with North Korea. I think that's a beautiful thing. Look, I've got 3 small children, a 4, 6, and 8-year-old. Very happy to see peace. You know, and I'm very happy to see him, you know, extend the life of the U.S. a few more years with the rolling back of regulations and the business optimism that's spread across the country. I just wish, you know, that candidate Trump that was so anti-foreign intervention in the Middle East would just get the troops out and really turn against doing anything else in the Middle East. It's just, I'm so tired of that situation. So, but overall, I'm fairly happy with President Trump. I'll be honest with you. It's yesterday. I was supposed to go to a donor dinner yesterday in Dallas, and they moved it, and I'm so frustrated because they moved it to the 31st, and I won't be around, so I won't be able to make it. But I hope to meet him one day, and I hope that he continues to do his best that he can do, and I hope that he doesn't get taken out of office.
Right, I do agree. Now, anyone, as always, the phone lines are open. I would love to hear the voice of someone calling in. And I do have another question I want to ask you briefly. This is from Alaska Prepper. It says, do you think our debt will be inflated away or will it be defaulted on? And what are the implications of both scenarios?
Well, if you study investing or look at the 2016 election or even what happened in 2008, typically the options that we all see and think could happen are not going to happen. So I would be on the side of that we're going to inflate, and everybody else would say, well, we'll default. I think there could be some other thing that happens, and it may, if it's under President Trump, it very well may happen. He may get this economy picked up enough and then do the ugly, ugly job of renegotiating the debt. First of all, you've got like $6 trillion of our debt owned by the Federal Reserve. That's $6 trillion right there. Clear that shit out. That's BS. Why do we owe our own Federal Reserve $6 trillion? So that's $6 trillion you could get rid of immediately with the snap of a finger. Now you've got to deal with China and these other nations. So, I don't know, but China's their debt's also accelerating as well. So they're not in the best of shape. And a lot of the bad stuff that's happened to America when it comes to our jobs being exported has been to benefit China and bring China up to the world stage and elevate them. I don't know if there's some sort of back end deal, but they owe us. They would just be a third world rule impoverished country without basically America bending over backwards with the WTO and letting them take advantage of us for the last 18 years, 19 years. So, but to answer the person's question, I would say that they're definitely not going to outright default. So I think it's an inflation or some sort of debt restructuring globally, because it's not just us, it's Europe and Asia too. So if everybody's in a mess to their eyeballs, it might be in everybody's benefit to do some sort of contained and controlled restructuring. Because remember, the guy sipping champagne in communist China and the guy in the Middle East or the North Korean dictator, nobody wants chaos. And when you talk about a fiat currency or blowing up the reserve currency, that is going to have huge implications for everybody that's in power. So the best thing I've ever heard somebody tell me, and I don't remember who it was, everybody in power wants to keep everything as it is because it's working out for them.
Yeah, good point there. Now, just as a scenario, I had Jim Willie on a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned he's famous for speaking about the idea of it being another currency issue, just a domestic dollar, as he called it, the Scheitz dollar or whatever it is. And so, and that was in reference to what's happening outside of our country with the recent development of the gold yuan backed futures out in China, and just the whole collaboration of that whole BRICS union and everything coming from that there's going to be a new international standard of money of some sort that will be outside of the petrodollar. And so that means all the current Federal Reserve notes probably will lose their value drastically, but still be utilized with the need of issuing some new currency for us to use locally. And so I think a lot about what's happening, and I use Venezuela as an example because it's such a small, isolated event in a sense, but it can help paint a bigger picture for what we're experiencing here and how they had a new Bolivar issued, and basically the note was redenominated into a new currency. Could you see that type of scenario happening where there could be two circulating mediums of exchange, one internationally and one domestically? And then what would that be like? Because we've never known anything other than just one single note. And then another question is, as I think of it, how everything around the world is priced in dollars. Can you see a time where, we go to some other country and it's priced in whatever it might be, where we're getting 6 treasury notes to whatever that one currency might be. Just some scenarios to play around with. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the world is moving towards global currencies, or some sort of one world currency, or more unionized currencies like the euro. So I don't think we're going to, in my opinion, I don't think we'll see a domestic dollar and an international dollar. I think if you see a crisis, or when we see a crisis, I think you'll see, remember, the global elites and world leaders, especially the G20, they want more than anything stability. So whether it's the purchase of oil, or, you know, the U.S. military policing many parts of the world, I think they want global order. So perhaps it's going to be some sort of win-win with China, the U.S., Russia, and Europe. I mean, if you think about the big players on planet Earth, you know, you really don't need 192 countries to come together and decide what the currency is going to be. You really need the Chinese president, the U.S., European leaders, Russia, maybe the Prime Minister of India. So you don't need but maybe 7 or 8 people in a room to come together and form some sort of long-term solution that they might see as a solution. Now, we might see it as, you know, an abomination. But, you know, I don't know. There might be some sort of oil, gold, commodity-backed global currency. And again, it won't be for the common man to exchange for those physical assets. It'll be more for the sovereigns. The U.S. has a lot of natural gas, has oil. A lot of other countries, they are huge oil producers. The U.S. still has officially is on record the largest holder of gold. But, you know, many other countries are purchasing and acquiring and accumulating more gold. So, you know, I don't know what the transition will be, but I would bet that global powers want there to be an orderly transition. If there's going to be a crisis, there is no alternative to the dollar. And that's where we kind of end up, you know, a dog chasing its tail. A dollar crisis almost presents a dollar rally, because if there's a dollar crisis, there's probably a fiat currency crisis, and that's going to blow the euro up. The euro is the first to go. The yuan's not really liquid, and it's not that, you know, it's not really used by anybody but the Chinese. So it's an interesting thing if we had some sort of systemic crisis overnight. If that happens, I don't know. But I would say if there's going to be an orderly transition, we're going global. There's going to be some sort of global currency. Jim Rickards talked about the SDR, which has been in place for 50, 60 years. Maybe it's going to be the SDR. Maybe they'll create a new SDR of some sort. But I think we're going to a unionized currency, which brings back to cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is a global currency. It's used in all countries. And there's, you know, because of the fee system and because of the way you can transact peer-to-peer, it's already in place, Bitcoin. So who knows? Maybe they'll adopt some sort of cryptocurrency.
Good job there. So as we draw towards the end, I'm extending an invitation to anyone watching, because typically, Daniel, we have a couple guys or young ladies call in to ask a question. So I don't want to leave you high and dry. So I'm trying to get people to call in. So we'll give it a couple seconds. But in your opinion, based upon what you study, what you're looking at, and what are some you want to share with any detailed investment type of things that you might be looking at that would be good for us to become familiar with before it becomes more mainstream? Anything that the alternative space could really benefit from as far as just looking at it and researching for themselves right now?
You know, if at the futuremoneytrends.com letter, you can subscribe. There's a weekly wealth digest. I do present these ideas. There are several companies that I'm waiting for them to go public. There was one in the cannabis space, Santa Veritas. It went public, but then in like 2 days later, after waiting for it to go public forever, they halted the shares because they did a triple merger. And now the company is going to have like 200 million in revenue, but it's going to be halted for months. So, you know, I'll alert everybody when that comes. But it's you know, I like cannabis. I like blockchain. I'm waiting for a blockchain company to go public. It's called Global Live. They're going to help companies, major corporations. They were part of that team that helped the Kodak company, that they'll help them adopt the blockchain. Just like companies needed to have their own websites, there's got to be a company out there that helps everybody adopt the blockchain, and that's what they're going to do. But they're not public. I think they're going to go public in a few weeks from now. And again, if you're a futuremoneytrends.com member, you'll be the first to know. And then the green energy boom. I think that's an interesting investment because there's definitely free market demand. The millennial generation wants to have electric vehicles. They want to have more sustainable energy. We want to have leave a better earth behind for our children. And then there's the government. The global governments are backing with massive stimulus. So, you know, I don't have any great ideas to present with details. I can only say that we're waiting for a few to go public, and we'll be happy to present them once they're ready.
Sounds good. So, Daniel, we do have a caller, and then we got a couple calls coming in. So, one at a time. But, caller, where you calling from, and what's your thoughts or what's your question for Daniel or myself?
Indianapolis, Indiana.
Indianapolis, Indiana. Good evening.
Good evening. My question is for Daniel.
Okay.
I'd like to know what his idea is on the long-term play with the yuan gold oil contract squeeze now that they've taken 12% of the market. If that increases, what's the long-term pressure on the dollar?
You know, I don't know what the pressure on the dollar is, but there's going to be a significant amount of pressure on the COMEX and all the fraud that happens with the London Exchange and in the United States. So hopefully that actually will ultimately, that and like things that are Sprott and Goldcorp are doing with blockchain would eliminate a lot of the fraud that happens in these markets with oil and with gold. As far as, you know, this being able to exchange, or Middle Eastern nations being able to exchange or have the option to exchange it for gold, you know, in my opinion, it is a game changer in the long term. It's going to provide a lot of liquidity for that market. And if you think, you know, if you're going to become a major player, what China did was basically hand it to everybody, where it's really, there's no risk. It's a no-lose situation for them to take the renminbi for the oil now. So I think you're already seeing Iran do direct contracts in euros with the EU. And if you see, let's say you see, you know, maybe it's not going to be Kuwait, but if you see another Middle Eastern country start to do more transactions, and that number rises, I mean, we're literally witnessing the death of the petrodollar, and the petrodollar that's the value of the dollar right there. So I think it is significant in the sense that, you know, it's going to be a slow death. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's definitely happening. There's certainty that the U.S. dollar will not be the reserve currency it is in 10 years from now.
All right. Thank you. Caller, any other questions that you want to chime in with?
No, let's go ahead and let the other caller chime in. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the call, buddy. Appreciate it. So we did get a question. So we have someone else call in. So Mike or Ruiz, if you want to call in, feel free to call in and ask a question, and then we'll let you go, Daniel. So we have a caller. This is one of the benefits of having an interactive audience. They call and ask some great questions.
Yeah.
Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hello, this is Mike from Queens, New York.
Mike from Queens, New York. What's on your mind, Mike? How you doing?
Hey, good evening. Great chat. Love to listen in on the channel all the time. I got a two-part question.
Okay.
First off, is it possible to go to a gold standard when most people don't even hold gold, and it's basically the big banks that control the gold and own it all? So to go to a gold standard seems like basically a fruitless idea in that regards. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a Hail Mary play, right? So they don't want a gold standard. That they definitely don't want. But if either the global order needed to restore order, they could restore order with some sort of gold backing or commodity tie. And this would be for institutional money. This would be for sovereigns to be able to exchange. Now, what my point for the U.S. was, let's say the U.S. was under attack in the currency markets, and there was actually somebody purposely trying to push it over the edge. This is beyond just a market reaction and a market collapse of the dollar. But let's say a foreign country was trying to push it over the edge. The U.S. could fight back strongly by tying the dollar to gold, which Reagan did a commission to see about it, and Trump actually talked about it during his campaign. And so far, I mean, when you think about things like moving the embassy to Jerusalem, Trump, on some of the things he talks about that are big and bold and people have talked about it for 20, 30 years, he may actually go through with it, especially if he finds his back against the wall. You know, they could revalue the gold to $15,000 an ounce, $20,000 an ounce, and they could back the currency.
Fair enough. Carl, is there anything else you want to chime in on?
Yeah, I understand exactly what he's saying, but what my thoughts on the whole matter is we don't just say we have half the gold that we say we have in Fort Knox or wherever they want to say it is. But the banks have been built in the stride forever, and then they can always pull the same trick they did in the past, whereas 30 years later, just take us off the gold standard and create the same fiat mess that we have today. And
absolutely.
The people responding with a gold standard.
Well, here's the wild card, and I've learned this so many times in investing, and I'm sure we all can relate to this. So many times in investing in the markets, there's always something that happens that nobody thinks is going to happen. So it's interesting. The only thing I've ever heard about the U.S. gold is either we have the gold or we don't have the gold. I've never in my life heard someone say, what if we have twice as much gold? What if we have quadruple the gold? We don't know. What we do know is they claim that not a single ounce has been added or deducted in the last 60 years. And that we know doesn't seem right. That's suspect. So do we have any gold left? You know, that's kind of the common thing. But I would put it out like this. What if we have way more gold than people think? And that's certainly possible. But as far as them, you know, resetting the system with a gold standard and then defaulting on 30 years, I have no doubt that I totally am with you. I have no doubt that in the end they'll screw the common person, and I have no doubt that they'll default on all their promises. That's what politicians and governments do.
Right. Fair enough. Carl, anything else you want to chime in?
Okay. Yeah, one thing on the blockchain. Do you foresee down the road everything going on the blockchain, like say the stock market, the banking system, even digital, like even our assets being digitized and everything being controlled and owned on this like blockchain ledger of some sort?
Yeah, and there's actually already a company doing it where they're turning shares into where there'll be tokens and shares that will be tracked on the blockchain. It's still ground floor, but I do foresee a time when our home title and escrow and many things, you know, marriage licenses, it'll all be on the blockchain.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for chiming in with us. Appreciate you, my friend. I got another caller, but thanks for calling in.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much. Have a great
my
day,
pleasure.
guys.
You as well. Yes, interesting. So, Daniel, we're going to draw towards the end of our conversation. We had another person calling in. So if you want to call in real quick, you can do such. But other than that, Daniel, it's been great having a chance to speak with you and get your thoughts on a variety of subjects. So appreciate you taking time to join us on RTD Live Talk, and got you a couple calls, so made it well worth it tonight on the Live Talk.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I guess it must have been my computer because I switched to this computer in my office and it's fine.
Okay, it was not a problem. I appreciate it anyway, so I just held them off a little bit until you came back. So, but as of now, okay, we have a call, so we go to the last caller.
Okay.
Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, this is Jeff. I'm calling from Florida.
Jeff from Florida. What's on your mind tonight, my friend?
Hey, I just had two quick questions. One is, I know you had that article, and they were talking about 43% of the general population have been in poverty. Mm-hmm. So for an average person, let's say they're making $35,000, $40,000 a year, and they got a mortgage and they got a car payment, and they're paying student loans and credit card bills, and they're trying to pay all their living expenses. Like, what would be the one thing of advice that you would give to a person in the general public? Would it be to get out of debt? Would it be to increase your income, get a second job? Would it be to buy silver and gold? Like, what would your piece of advice be to someone in the general public who's in that similar situation?
Get out of debt. My wife and I really focused on being debt-free 10 years ago. And I got to tell you, the gold and silver is nice to own and it feels great and it's got peace of mind. But, you know, that monthly obligation, once you tackle that and crush that and reduce that down to almost nothing, where it's just your electric bill and your food, I got to tell you, that's liberty, that's freedom. So I would say the number one thing people should tackle if they can is debt. Reduce it, don't adopt it, don't finance your vehicles. You know, I know on paper it makes sense to have the mortgage. Don't pay off the mortgage. You know, I'll tell you from my own life. I lived in Southern California, and I moved about an hour and a half into the desert in order to buy a $95,000 house in 2009 because I wanted to have something I could pay off. And I paid it off with my wife, and we were mortgage free. And then we moved to Texas, and we bought something that was like 1 times our annual income. Now, most people would buy something 10 times our annual income, and we could have, but we didn't. We bought something that was very sustainable. So I'll tell you, as somebody who's really adopted that no debt lifestyle, you know, over gold and silver, over investing, certainly, because you don't know what the outcome is. I do know what the outcome, and I'm certain of the outcome of having no debt, and that is a very, very comfortable lifestyle. And you know, I really don't see where you're going to get stressed from if you have your bills and everything's so minimized.
Right, I do agree. Caller, any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one more quick question. I was reading an article this past week, and they said that in the future they're expecting 66 million people's jobs to be replaced with robots and automation. So what type of career field, what type of skills, what type of niche market should you be in to help secure, you know, having a job livelihood, you know, 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
I'll give you some great advice that Rick Rule gave me when I asked him the same question. Try to find things that service the rich, especially when it comes to quality of services, because the rich, whether it's a recession, depression, transition, the rich will continue to purchase these things. And if you have any kind of financial savvy, the rich are always looking to make more money. So if you can service the rich in helping them make more money, that's even better. As far as other niches or what's going to happen with the robots, you know, the robots may end up creating a lot of jobs, just like the internet did. They said the internet was just going to destroy everything, but here Mike and I are making a living off of the internet. So 2 jobs right here have been created. So I don't know what's going to happen when the robots you know, replace a lot of jobs. There'll also might be some new entrepreneurs that can create businesses from those. So, you know, I don't want to tell people like get into green energy or get into gold mining. What I'd rather tell you is, look, monetize your passion and just know that the way to make money is always going to come down to, can you deliver value to other people? How much value you can deliver to how many people, or maybe you only need to deliver value to one person because he's a billionaire. I don't know what that situation is, but just focus on delivering value to other people, focus on your passions. And, you know, all these scary statistics and these things are going to happen by 2050. Try not to focus on them. Try to just focus on delivering value to other people and enjoy this precious finite time we have here on Earth.
Very true. Well, caller, thank you for calling in. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts and asking questions today and tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, Daniel Amenduri from Future Money Trends, thank you for joining us tonight on RTD Live Talk. It's been a blast. And so I'm glad we got several questions answered and a lot of great advice given. And so thank you once again. Looking forward to continue to follow your work. Any last thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
Check out futuremoneytrends.com. It's a free subscription. It's all my weekly wealth digest. And you can also see the story of how my wife and I achieved financial independence. And of course, Mike, I had a great time doing this conversation, and I'd love to meet you someday. I don't know what city that is in the background, but I'd hope to meet you in person one day.
Yep, I'm not far from Detroit, so in Michigan.
Michigan. Okay,
yeah.
Well, maybe you can come to Texas. It's a lot warmer down here.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that, especially the winter time. But no, well, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining everybody. As always, give us a thumbs up. Make sure you share this information. There's definitely a wealth of knowledge provided for you guys to share. Hope everyone learned something. I know I definitely did. So Daniel, once again, thank you. Everyone have a good night. I will see you later for our next live talk in the days ahead. So other than that, everybody have a good night. See you later. Thanks.
Best of luck to you. Thank you.